In a solemn moment for the Catholic Church and billions around the world, Pope Francis has passed away at 88 in Vatican City. Cardinal Kevin Farrell announced the pontiff's death, citing natural causes after a brief illness. The Vatican has begun preparations for the conclave to elect a new pope, with cardinals worldwide converging for the sacred rituals.
A spiritual giant is no more. Pope Francis, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has died at the age of 88.
Carissimi fratelli e sorelle, con profondo dolore devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco.
Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Pope Francis had many firsts attached to his name. The first Jesuit pope, the first from the Southern Hemisphere, and possibly the first pope to have an inclusive stance on homosexuality.
Se una persona è gay e cerca il Signore e ha buona volontà, ma chi sono io per giudicarla?
That now iconic phrase, "Who am I to judge?" became a testament to his desire to bring back people to the church, no matter their background. His progressive views came to the fore once again in 2015 when he urged the world to take climate change seriously and protect what he called our common home. With his message always grounded in dialogue, peace, and human dignity, he reached out to Muslims, Jews, atheists, and even those estranged from the church. Though his health declined for the worse this year, Pope Francis continued to lead with resilience. In one of his last public appearances, just hours before his death, he appealed for global peace.
Fratelli e sorelle.
His papacy will be remembered not just for his revolutionary views, but also for how deeply he cared for people from all walks of life. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
Well, joining us, Father Robinson Rodriguez, Dr. Michael Williams, who's president of the United Christian Forum. We're also joined by Dr. John Dayal, and in a little while we'll be joined by Archbishop Mar Joseph Pamplani, the Archbishop in Thalassery. Thank you all very much for being with us. Dr. John Dayal, let me come to you first. How did Pope Francis's emphasis on humility and social justice, in a sense, redefine the papacy's global influence?
Francis left the world a much better place than he found it. The way he reached out, he represented the common person, which is what people in high places forget to do. More than reaching out to them, more than preaching them, he represented them and spoke for them, speaking to various nations, speaking to the international community on climate change. Above all, speaking to the Catholic Church and other churches directly when he spoke for a better stance on what are called the LGBTQ and people of other genders, other denominations, other lines of thought. So those are not talk downs, they are talk ups, and where he took on people like himself to speak for those who are marginalized. That is a great thing for a big man to do. Francis
we're also joined by Eric Lyman, a senior journalist who joins us now from Rome. Thank you very much for being with us. From the Vatican City, I believe, is where he is. Eric, what is the process right now in terms of the selection of the next pope?
Well, officially we're in a period of mourning, but the dates have been released for the gathering of the College of Cardinals, which is how the next pope will be selected. They'll have to start meeting sometime between May 6th and May 12th, and and that extra time is allowed for cardinals from around the world to make the trip to Rome, where they will participate in this process. But there's no telling how long the process will last. There's not a lot of familiarity between the cardinals these days, thanks in part to the fact that Francis very rarely called consistories, which is when the cardinals would meet, and so there's almost surely going to be a period of people getting to know, of these cardinals getting to know each other better when the conclave gets underway. The conventional wisdom here is that if a result is reached quite quickly, it'll be a high-profile member of the College of Cardinals, somebody like Cardinal Parolin, who's the Secretary of State, or Cardinal Zuppi, who was a papal envoy, or somebody like that. If it goes on longer, I think there's no real way to know what would happen next.
Father Robinson Rodriguez, several of the decisions which the Pope had taken, Pope Francis, were backed in a strong sense of humanity. For example, he backed same-sex civil unions in 2020. The Vatican allowed blessings for same-sex couples. The first women appointments to senior Vatican roles. He reopened a debate on female deacons, restricted the traditional Latin Mass. How have these, in a sense, defined what he was all about?
You see, if I have to describe Pope Francis in one word, I could say people's Pope. He understood people, he went into them, he understood their pain, and through his humility, he set an example for us all to follow. Through his preferential love for the poor and the marginalized and the migrants, he has set an example for us all to follow that example. Decisions which he has made, and he has spoken out on different occasions on these issues, what you just now said. These are, some matters are there which are discussed. He opened discussions, and it is good. He has taught us all through the Synod to listen to each other, to listen to one another. And that listening, he has given a new meaning of prayerful listening. So now we have started listening to each other. That's something good, and it should be appreciated, and we all will miss him for that.
Dr. Michael Williams, what is your sense on some of these key decisions? Backing same-sex civil unions, for example. Would you say that this was a progressive Pope who's taken the Church to a level which it wasn't, where he's understood the needs of people around the world and operated with an open mind?
Vishnu, first I'd like to say that certainly the world has lost a good soul. One of those people who cared about all the good things that mattered in life, all the things that mattered for people. A very important person, but we have lost a good soul today. And the world mourns that. The world mourns the loss of somebody who so deeply was conscious and serious about the fact that people needed to unite, that people needed to come together, no matter what their faith, no matter what their belief. And so he moved across so many boundaries, cracked so many boundaries that had never been touched before. One of the things that I feel that made him such a pope was he was the first non-European pope, so as to say, in 12 centuries. That's 1,200 years of the papacy that we've had a non-European pope. And so he brought about a worldview. He was the first pope from the Americas. It brought about an enriched worldview where he grew up in a place of abject poverty, where he was able to connect with people, where he saw the reality of human suffering, and he was able to bring it together. And when he got to the post that God appointed him to be as the Pope, he was able to bring all of that out. And which is why, as my dear brother just mentioned, he was a people's Pope. He reached out to people across every spectrum. So certainly, one hopes and prays that the next Pope that does come in carries on this rich legacy of bringing in people, regardless of their faith, regardless of what their sexual belief is, knowing fully well that every person needs the love of Jesus Christ. And with that spirit that he progressed, I hope it carries on in that spirit, certainly.
Dr. John Dayal, I personally believe one of the most important things that Pope Francis did was to equate climate, the crisis, the climate crisis, as a moral crisis. Basically making the point that if we want to save ourselves, we need to look at climate not just from a rational standpoint, but also a deeply philosophical and moral standpoint. Perhaps the wasting away of our planet is a moral dilemma that we all need to address. In that sense, how was that a really powerful message to billions around the world?
I think his tirade against war and his call for sanity on climate and the weather are two of the defining factors of his papacy, although other issues capture the popular mind for the moment. As you correctly said, on climate change, he defied ill health to go to Europe to participate in that summit. The sight of him in his wheelchair at the summit is something that people will recall. Similarly, when he was talking about artificial intelligence, because he was a pope who was engaging with science, with climatology, with all sorts of other issues which the world will face in the near future, and challenging man to face these things with a sense of care for the underdog, care for the poor, and a confirmation of ethics, because that was the overriding principle of his papacy too, his commitment to ethics.
Eric, he was unwell for a period of time. A couple of weeks back, there was a sense that he was really struggling for his life, and then he rebounded, he came back. And then all of a sudden, he passed away quite quickly, a sudden illness once again. Could you give us a sense of, his health over the last couple of months?
Well, he went into the hospital in mid-February, and he remained in hospital for a total of 38 days. He was let out on March 23rd, but he still had around-the-clock observation from a medical team in the Casa San Marta, where he lived. He did seem to be improving quite quickly. He was scheduled to meet with King Charles of Great Britain on April 7th. That was originally canceled, and then it was rescheduled for only 2 days later, and they were able to meet. And he had more and more public appearances. In the Holy Week, he was out with the public on 3 different occasions. And then on Easter Sunday, he met with the U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance, who's now in India, obviously. And he had a tete-a-tete with him only about 20 hours before he passed away. He didn't look healthy in his public appearances, but he seemed to be enthused. He was happy to be with the public that he loved so much. And so I think it was a surprise to everyone when we discovered he had passed this morning.
No, it is very sad indeed. I'm also joined by John Bevid in a few moments from now. But let me go across to Michael Williams once again. To you, what was your principal inspiration? We've spoken about several themes, and what to you personally, what did Pope Francis mean?
Personally, I'll tell you, Vishnu, he was a man of peace. I think he was one of the best brand ambassadors for the Prince of Peace himself. And wherever he traveled, he carried the message of peace. He spoke out against the war between Russia and Ukraine. He spoke out against what's happening in Gaza. So he was not a man who held back when it came for peace. He strove for that. That is something that certainly inspires me to understand that at a time, especially in our own nation, where we look at so many different jagged edges and things that are falling apart and breaking, that it is a time for peace and a call for unity, that we as a nation also need to understand that we are one people, under God. God has created all of us as equals. And that message that people should live in harmony, he said the same thing when 2023, when he addressed the citizens of India, when he brought about his message. He talked about the fact of making sure that we meet in an interreligious way, that there is harmony with all of those that live around us, that we live together in peace, and that we continuously build these bridges. That is an important message for not just India, but for the world at this time. This is one of those things that genuinely inspires his humility, his ability to be able to connect with the poorest of poor in such a remarkable, rich, meaningful manner, which transcends any sort of boundaries of I am bigger than you or I'm in a much more exalted position. None of that. He was a true servant of mankind in the sense that he dedicated all the last 12 years of his papacy traveling the world, bringing about this message of peace and harmony and a hope into the lives of the very poorest of people as well. This is an important message that certainly resonates not just with me, but with Christians, with Catholics of the faith across the world. And this is something that we will certainly miss, and we deeply mourn this loss of this wonderful human being.
I'm also joined by John Bevere right now. Thank you very much, John, for being with us. I believe you are at the Vatican at this stage. It is just such a sad day, a tragic day for billions around the world. But there is also a great sense of anticipation about what happens next. What's the process in selecting the next pope?
Yeah, of course, as you say, a very sad day, especially for the more than 1 billion Catholics around the world who look to the Pope for guidance and leadership. So, of course, the mood here in Rome and in Vatican City is somber. But as you say, the process immediately gets underway to lay the Pope to rest, but also to then elect a new Pope. So we have the cardinals will form a conclave where they will decide who the next Pope should be. Now, Pope Francis, of course, where he was very much unique in terms of coming from the southern hemisphere. He was born in Argentina to Italian parents, and so there will be a lot of questions about whether maybe that is continued, about whether the next Pope will be someone not European, possibly not Italian. But of course it is Italians, Europeans more widely, who have dominated the process of being Pope for centuries in the past. So all of that is to be played out. But what happens immediately now is this period of mourning, and then of course the very detailed ceremony that comes to laying the Pope to rest and people paying their respects. You might be able to hear behind me there are bells ringing out. There are crowds gathering in Vatican City to pay their respects. And of course this all just coming off the back of the Easter weekend where the Pope made his final address. Of course there had been deep concern about his health whilst he'd been in hospital for many weeks earlier this year, but we had the news this morning from the Vatican that he had died at just after 7:30 this morning local time. So now the very in-depth and complicated process of laying this Pope to rest and then electing a new Pope, as you say.
John Bevere, thank you very much for sharing those details. We'll all be waiting with a great deal of anticipation on the entire process at the Vatican and who will be the next Pope. Thank you very much for being with us.